into the people of Tyrone and try to find people who maybe knew the family. Because there's a lot of layers of secrets there. But I will let Mari tell her story and just talk.
I'll keep it brief since I know many of you already know it pretty well. But yeah, I was born in the Besborough Mother and Baby Institution in Cork in 1960 to a Josephine Fitzpatrick, who was not, excuse me, not a young girl at the time. I mean, at the time we thought she was in her late 20s, turned out she was older than that. So I found her in 2002, not without its own bumps and perils and brick walls placed, obviously, to keep us from finding our. But we enjoyed a very close relationship until she passed in 2013. Let's see, I've been involved in co-founding the Justice for Magdalene's organization back in the early 2000s, campaigning to get justice for the women who had suffered through those institutions. My mother was one of those as well. And then also getting involved with other adopted people in Ireland, like Fiona, an old group that had started in Dublin back in the 90s, Adoption Ireland. And now we've kind of morphed into Adoption Rights Alliance. So we've been actively working the legislative front and trying to get adult adopted people, both in Ireland and those who were sent abroad, access to their birth certificates, which we were successful in getting this year, but there's a lot of buts that go with that statement. It remains to be seen. They've got an overwhelmed, social network system over there, TUSLA, who just are not purpose fit right now to handle the influx of applications that they've gotten thus far. So people have been on waiting lists for months. The same with the Adoption Authority of Ireland, who would have been the formal stamp of approval for people like Fiona who were adopted in country. Their adoption order would have been issued by that authority rather than the way we do it here, which is by state. So they're also woefully behind in, dealing with applications. And then the second part of that is we had also fought for some sort of redress, reparations, for the mothers who were forcefully separated from their children, and we know that they were in many, many cases. And then, of course, for the children who spent time in these institutions and lost their parents and lost connections to families in Ireland. So that part of it is still currently being moved through the Irish government. It's already passed. First phase, it goes to the Seanad. We think like next weekish, maybe. It's probably going to fly through there as well. So our only way to stop it at this point is if the president, Michael Higgins, refuses to sign it. But then that could also put us in jeopardy. Because if they can't, you explain it better than I do. It's to do with if he declares it.
If he
you
declares
say
it if he doesn't agree with it and refuses to sign it, it goes back to a legal argument, and all they can do is test its constitutionality.
Constitutionality.
And if it passes the constitutionality test, it can never again be challenged or tested.
So we're stuck with whatever
by
it is.
him, he could refuse to sign it on kind of a moral ground, but it could end up not being a good thing for us. It kind of puts him in because he was very much on our side when they were bringing in this, the birth cert legislation, we'll call it. He didn't agree with, it was the birth cert and an awful lot more, and he didn't really agree with it, and he made a couple of very scathing comments when he was signing it in. But he knew if he didn't sign it and it went to be challenged, it could never again be changed. So him signing it at that point was the lesser of the two evils. our system is a little bit weird.
No weirder than ours.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I watch the progress of bills in the States here, and it's just amazing, some of the hurdles people have to go through. So that's essentially my story. Now, in a more recent update, I started, I've been on Ancestry for probably the better part of 6-7 years. My daughter and I both tested. I didn't have a whole lot of matches, like a lot of Irish people. It kind of depends, what you get back initially. But I'll say I roundabout had maybe 600 people in the variously second to fifth cousin range. Wasn't a huge number. Uploaded to GEDmatch. I have a 23andMe test I haven't done yet, and I am going to do that. And I uploaded to MyHeritage, and it was actually through MyHeritage that I had a first to second cousin match in New Zealand reach out to me, and then subsequently a second cousin match. And through these two delightful people, we figured out my mother's true genealogy, and it had nothing to do with the woman we thought she was, or that she thought she was. So what we've come to realize is at some stage in her institutional upbringing, she was given incorrect birth details for a little girl who had died in Wexford. And that's what she carried with her. And then she kind of fudged it maybe a bit more when she went to the UK, shaved about 7 years off her age. So that made it a little tougher to find her. But, eventually we overcame that obstacle. But now I come to find out, instead of being born in 33, she was born in 29. So she was definitely older than, we thought she was when she had. But we learned who her actual mother was. And I've learned some wonderful and tragic, just the usual historical things we all end up getting from cousins who know the background a bit. The nice part is the second cousin that I met, Mary Collette, is the daughter of one of Gorey's foremost historians, Michael Fitzpatrick. He is my great second cousin. I'm sorry, first cousin once removed. My mother's first cousin, if that makes sense.
Wow.
Lovely man, and unfortunately he passed in 2019, so I never got to reach out to him. But he was on my radar, oddly enough. I remember seeing pictures of him being interviewed in the Independent and the Tipperary newspapers and yada yada. And I thought, geez, he looks so much like my mother. It's scary, and just kind of set it aside, like a lot of us tend to do. But here it does turn out he was my mother's first cousin, which would explain the resemblance. And not only that, but he knew a good bit of my mother's history and her brother and sister's history. So he's, through his records and Mary's bringing me up to date on that, we've learned quite a lot, but still a lot of holes missing. So
Her sister were named through David.
what's that?
Why do you she had a brother and sister was named through?
Oh yeah. I didn't know she had siblings. Yeah, sorry.
Wow.
So yeah, and they were all three of those children were non-marital births. So I do not know my mother's parental line. I don't know for sure my own parental line. I have a putative name I've been given, but no DNA matches on that side. But beyond that, like, we don't know who my mother's father was. I suspect I do now through DNA, but that's kind of hard to prove, still working on it. So that's pretty much it for me.
Mary, can I ask a question? Is
Sure.
you traced your mother originally back to Wexford? Is it still Wexford?
No, it's definitely Ballingarry and Tipperary. Now, Michael Fitzpatrick, the historian, moved, or his parents moved to Gorey, so that's how he ended up in Wexford. There are, I believe, some tenuous back and forth. I mean, they're not that terribly far apart. But a lot of kind of Tipperary, Kilkenny, Wexford hops.
Mm-hmm.
But there is probably still some blood there as well.
Mm-hmm.
More Ballingarry and the Commons in Tipperary.
Mm-hmm. Ancestry tells me that you and I are related on my father's side, which I think I said to you I suspected, but it's only because I don't know much about where they're from, because they came to Newfoundland probably in the late 1700s with the original migration from Ireland. So,
And what was their surname again? I know I've looked at your tree, but I forget.
well, it's Foley.
Okay, they were the Foleys, right?
Yeah, it was Foley, and there's, Walsh and Powers and Connor and Connors and, variety of names now. I just have not had good luck with that part of the that part of the tree, but I'm working on it partly because I want to know who you are too.
She just might have an answer for you. Go ahead.
Walsh, what names did you say
Walsh.
again? Sorry, Walsh.
Walsh, Power, Connors, Saunders, which I think is an English name. I think there was an English person in there.
Walsh Power would certainly be, there's a lot of them like in North County Waterford.
There's also in Ballingarry.
Which would be very close to South Tipperary, which would be where
Mhm,
home actually
Yeah.
ended up being from. So
mhm.
that whole, if you drew a circle kind of between Tipperary and Waterford, that's the same genealogy, gene
Yeah.
pool thing. So you'd be both right, yeah.
Interestingly, one of our mothers, she had lost her baby in Besborough. He actually died and was buried in the famine cemetery in Cork. That's where they ultimately admitted that the baby was, after she had tried to find out for years from the nuns, and the nuns lying to her and telling her, oh, he's right here, under our feet. No, he was off in a famine grave. But she is also a Walsh, and we are, I think Madeline and I are fourth cousins, and same area. So Ballingarry, the Commons.
Mhm. Yeah, I think of you whenever I'm doing it, because I keep thinking I got to find that. I have to
There's a
find
link
that
there.
connection somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, we do. I know I have Connors, Powers, and definitely Walsh's in my,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, that's my father's side. Yeah.
So
It's interesting. Paula has, and it's from one of the sites that's confirmed. There are people from Ballingarry.
really,
Most of them are from around Killinaw, and I've checked, and she doesn't match to either of you guys. But again, you inherit the different amounts of DNA.
right.
But again, this is how, and this is what I just tell everybody all the time. This is how you find the missing pieces, is all of this is, again, I know there's people who don't want to do their DNA for various reasons, and that's fine. But when you get into it, it's the research that you share with these, your other connections, that helps fill in these pieces. Because when you can come at it from a different direction, you find missing pieces in the family. You find missing people from the family, missing siblings, the one that went to America or the one that went to England or Australia. And then it starts to come together. So I hold out hope that pretty much there aren't many things that can't be solved. I mean, again, and as I say that with, a million illegitimate, I myself have a lot of illegitimate ancestors, but I have been able to, I've discovered the identity of a fourth great grandfather who, my third great grandfather was born out of wedlock in 1840 or so. And I've been able to figure out, at least there's one of the brothers. And I even think that I know which brother, based on proximity, based on DNA matches, based on following the people and the names that they gave their children. It was must have been a very strange situation back in 1840. But, it's things like that that give me hope, that like say to you guys, like, yeah, we can figure it out,
The answer's there. It is.
Yeah, it is.
We've
really
learned, I guess, the way, like, again, with adopted people, the way we've always, or I shouldn't say we all, those of us that have some logic, and you do have to approach it cautiously, and you have to be really careful and really thorough with your research, because what you don't want to be doing is reaching out, contacting the wrong family, and whether you get a negative or a positive result, possibly getting their hopes up or throwing a surprise at them that they not their surprise, you know what I mean? So we do have to be doubly careful with the way we approach it, and dot every I, cross every T, double check things. Well, a prime example, Fiona actually made a phone call for me to the Ballingarry registrar, the parish registrar, who was a lovely woman and very helpful and clearly knew what she was doing, because she said, I think I found it, but what had happened was my mother's baptism was registered under the surname Fitzgerald rather than Fitzpatrick.
Oh,
All the other details were correct. So her mother's, forename, date of birth, the whole 9 yards, but the registrar said, this happens. Sometimes it gets written down incorrectly, and you have to be careful to catch those, even where things look like they might not match up, So yeah, it's an interesting
And
mystery.
patience too.
What's that?
And for me, like finding out that like when I discovered something, that I had to sit with it, and then when I tried to reach out, the family has to sit with it. And when they're ready to come back, it can be a year or two.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
so you just have to be patient that everybody has to take their own time in processing that the world, their family, their world, their whatever is a little bit different than they've been told.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tough for Irish families. One thing we have learned, like you mentioned, 1840, really, to have a non-marital birth was not a problem in Ireland up until the late 20s. Yeah. I mean, once, it became a free state, and De Valera and his lovely moral dictums and how he wanted this, national model of purity. That was sort of what created the issues between families and records and people not being willing to talk about that child that disappeared or the relative who went away, maybe to England or Canada or wherever. But back before that, I mean, kids were raised in a village, by their own.
I've found that in local Virginia communities of my dad's family. There was there's this little area in Fauquier County, Virginia, where in that early to mid part of the 1800s, it was not uncommon to have an older, wealthier man and a woman living with him and a whole bunch of children. And there was no marriage certificate. And sometimes the children had the mother's name, and sometimes the children had this older, wealthier man's last name, or they went back and forth. But it was obviously an accepted thing, because there's too many personal examples that I have found within my family, but also just by studying the census records in the community and everything. It went on. It was just accepted.
It's kind of mind-blowing to people.
It is.
Not, like in more modern times, oh yeah, people accepted kids.
Yeah.
Were born on the wrong side of the blanket, but really that was more of an older custom than it was modern. Yeah.
I have a question about, I've seen estimates of the number of people who were, part of this adoption system. And I think the number I've seen seems so low, like 2,000 or something ridiculous like that. And
well, that would be true for the US, for those of us sent to the US.
Oh, okay.
There may be, I think I'm up to I've probably found about another 250 on top of that through manifests, through petitions. And I have to extrapolate and say that number would probably be closer to possibly 500 to 1,000, because of course not all states put their manifests or
Right
online. So I can only go by what's available to me. But the official record for the Department of Foreign Affairs in Ireland was, I think, 2,046 children that were sent to the US and some other areas in UK and Scotland, Canada, a couple to Australia, I believe. But yeah, I do believe there were more than that, but not hugely more.
Okay.
That number could grow. In terms of people who were adopted, boarded out, which would have been prior to adoption becoming legal in Ireland in 1953, we reckon there's probably 100,000 people, and then multiply that by the numbers of birth parents, got 300,000 people that are affected by this or have been affected by it.
There's a woman that, it's interesting, contacted me a couple of years ago and then just contacted me again this week. She's a match to Paula, but she's the woman that Paula is the closest match to on Ancestry, is the woman that's helped us the most. It's like a first cousin once removed, and we've learned things about the family that we would have never known in a million years. And so this woman that contacted me is the same, kind of the same distance from Marie that Paula is, first cousin once removed, like almost the exact same amount of centimorgans or whatever it is. And in her father was boarded out to, at the age, I think, of like 3. They don't know where he was for the first 2 or 3 years of his life. And then this farm couple who couldn't have children took him in, but basically mistreated him horribly. And, you know, it was for, they took him in so that he could work the farm. And her dad doesn't, he's still alive, but he will not do a DNA test. He will not talk about it. But this woman, Rachel, she has found out some information, and apparently she knows her dad's birth mother. And again, there were about 3 or 4 other children born to her dad's birth mother, and they're all documented, but her father is not among the documented children, which is interesting. Like the other half siblings like knew about each other, but nobody knew about her father. And because I think he would have been, I think he was would have been the youngest. And
He could have been the product maybe of an affair, and that.
well, I think yeah, I'm trying to remember if she got into much detail about the siblings, if they had different fathers or the same father. I'm not sure, but I guess they had kind of, you know, whatever, maybe had found each other, but yeah, didn't know about this youngest. And so she had put it aside for a couple of years. I think it was 2019 she last contacted me, and then just this week or last week, in the last week, she contacted me and said she was starting to look again. And we Paula's relative Marie, Marie's father had, you know, there were like 12 siblings, and we believe that one of those siblings was perhaps, probably most likely Paula's mother. But again, we have to either find out for sure or rule it out before we can kind of move on to a new hypothesis. And then it looks like one of the other brothers was the father of this woman, Rachel's father. And we think we know which one based on where he was, and, you know, how he would have been in proximity to the birth mother and that kind of thing. But we don't know for sure.
Paula, a question for you. Have you gotten any more information from anyone, either the adoption authority or TUSLA? Well, I know TUSLA probably wouldn't have had anything on you, but since you were kind of one of the illegals, did you?
Wait, let me see. She might, wait, Paula, are you still there?
She might not have her mic on.
Yeah, or I know she.
Is it Paula Douglas? Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, there we
Yeah,
go.
I think somebody put me on mute on the beginning, so, but I'm here. I'm kind of working and here, so. No, I haven't been able to get any more information. I did reach out to TUSLA several years ago, and they weren't able to find anything on me. But oddly enough, there was 2 babies that are 2 toddlers that my parents brought over with me on the plane from Ireland, and they found files on them, but not me. So, but they were legally adopted.
Right.
So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, like they send a couple who have adopted illegally as escorts for.
Well, I was always told it was to pay for their plane ticket, you know, for the 2 of them to come over. So.
Yeah, do you know where those 2 children were born? Well, you know you were born, right?
Pardon?
You know where you were born, correct?
Not really. No, I don't.
We believe it was the Rotunda Hospital.
We don't really know,
We don't know for
because
sure, yeah.
we're just assuming it was St. Patrick's Guild, through St. Patrick's Guild, that I was adopted from. My mother my adopted mother, she always told me that I was in a nursing home, and that's where they got me. And they got me when I was less than a week old. So those are the only stories that she was ever able to tell me. It was very vague. The only other thing we're hoping on is a connection that Lori's been able to come up with, this Marie. We've been trying to get this DNA test from a possible half sibling. I don't know, Lori, it's been about 4 years now, 3 years.
Yeah, I think it's been about 4 years. And
so I
but-
appreciate
but
the talk on patience, but
there
my
are-
patience is
I really, really, you wait so
There's-
many decades.
yeah, I'm not getting any younger either. So
Yeah.
that's, you know.
there are 3 potential half siblings to Paula, and there were 4. One passed away. There are 3. They all live in Ireland. They all had different fathers. All had different birth fathers, same mother. And again, so many things that we learned from Marie about the family that match up to this woman, Mary, being her birth mother. But we don't know. We just don't know. And so Marie is in touch with this one cousin of hers in Dublin that would possibly potentially be Paula's half sister. But she doesn't know about Paula, and Marie has been trying to get her to do the DNA without kind of telling her exactly who Paula is, I think. And then, the pandemic came up, and the last that we had heard was that Marie's daughter had gone over to Dublin, and that this potential half sister had done the DNA test, and Marie's daughter has it, who lives in Scotland, and we don't know where it is now. If that was true,
But may have been submitted, but you're not sure.
I don't think it wasn't. I don't think it was submitted. Like, she would have sent it back to me. I think we just the plan was for Marie to get the DNA from her daughter and then mail it back to me. But that was like, oh my gosh, maybe 8 months ago, almost a
At
year.
least, yeah.
Yeah. So what we're gonna do is, we know the identity of the other 2 half siblings, and like, we wanted to respect Marie and the family secrets, but at this point we're maybe going to reach out to there's a half brother, that potential half brother that lives over there, that we will maybe try to reach out to and see if he is open to doing a DNA test,
No, I
because
would.
it's gone on too long.
Yeah, exactly. And like, again, at this stage, I don't think there's a body in Ireland that's not aware that at any given moment, they may get a phone call from somebody that's going to,
Yeah,
it's there. It's
It's
the
there.
It's back. I mean, it's been in the news constantly for the last couple of months, but I don't know if you're aware of it, the whole Kerry baby case has come back up. There's a case 40 years ago where there was a baby found on a beach.
Mhm.
And long story short, a woman got charged with the baby's death, but it turns out it wasn't her baby. She had another baby around the same time. And they had, basically, the guards lambasted her for months in a tribunal. She was left off, did nothing
was
to do with her.
horrendous.
Did nothing to do with her.
Oh my God.
That little baby, the original baby, was buried, but they exhumed him about 5 years,
2021, I think.
3 years
Yeah.
ago,
Yeah.
and did another DNA test on him. Now that's high in the news in Ireland at the moment. There's 2 sides. A, they're going to find out exactly who the parents are, but B, he had 28 stab wounds, this 5-day-old baby. So finding out who his parents are, one thing. Finding out who killed him is a whole other thing. It's in the news. It's DNA has become, between the mother and baby home stories and DNA testing, it's in the 9 o'clock news in Ireland every day at the moment. So I would approach the brother calmly, just say, look, there is a potential of you having a sister or brother or whatever, and just say, look, would you like to do a DNA test just to confirm it one way or the other?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a question of Paula and whoever else wants to answer. And Paula, you said something about you being an illegal adoption, and that you were brought over so to pay for the tickets for the others. You basically, are you saying that you got sold?
No, my parents are from Ireland. They're in Dublin, and they had connection to through my dad's sister to apparently to the nuns at St. Patrick's Guild,
Mhm.
and they wanted to adopt a baby. They wanted to have their own child, and they weren't able to. And then they'd already planned to come to the U.S. The paperwork was already done and everything. And then they found out there was a baby they could adopt. So
Okay.
the story I was always told was that since I wasn't in the paperwork of coming over here, they had to
Mhm.
make up a story that my mom was my real mom.
Gotcha.
And they didn't tell anyone. My mom didn't even tell her mom about this, according to what she told me. And so in order to pay for their tickets to the US, they brought over these two toddlers. They went to New York, and they met at the airport. My dad, I remember his stories that he walked these two little boys over to their parents at the airport and handed them off. And then my mom and dad, they ended up staying in Boston for a couple of years. And that's the story.
So you don't
So,
have a paper trail. Like
no.
many of us have. We're able to see birth certificates and census, and you don't have a paper trail. So you are totally reliant now on DNA and another person.
Yeah.
Okay.
Paula, do you know where those toddlers were born? Or did your parents know?
Paula, we had worked on this a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I
and
remember.
One of we kind of tracked them down a little bit. One of them has passed away. I think maybe I even asked you about it, Mari.
Yeah.
I'll look
Ringing
through
a
like my
bell. Yeah.
paper trail or my trail, because we did find something on them. I'll look for it, Paula.
Yeah.
You know, I have all this, I keep all of the stuff. It's just a matter of then finding it again. But
I was gonna say, I think I have a
remember-
copy of Paula's manifest, so
Yeah.
I'll look at it again.
Okay.
You know,
I
can
do remember that I
always
was
remember.
able to track down the family of one of the people on the plane. And I think Lori found his obituary. He had
Yeah.
died a couple of years before, and I
Oh.
was able to track down his son, and he called me. I just thought he'd want to know the story. And so I told him the story. And the sad part is that he said that his dad had tried searching for his mother. I believe he was a legal adoption, though.
Mhm.
And he wasn't able to find her before he passed away.
Mhm.
So I just thought that was sad, but you know, I felt that I needed to reach out to him and at least, give him that information. So, and I don't remember the other person, Lori. I think he wasn't as easy to find.
he wasn't as easy to find, and I feel like we found something on him, but like we couldn't see all the information on the page or something. But I've got it somewhere, so I will
Yeah.
look for that and bring that up again.
Probably do as well.
Paul, you
But
know,
I don't remember. Oh, sorry. I
no, go
don't
ahead.
remember anything about where they were born, but I do know St. Patrick's Guild was involved.
Okay.
And I even said that to Tusla when they found the files. I said, well, St. Patrick's Guild was involved, and my parents took those children to the US, and my parents had connection. Wouldn't you have to have a pretty good assumption that I was from St. Patrick's Guild? I mean, they were involved in this illegal adoption.
Well, they were just an adoption society. So, I mean, those children could have been born in Besborough, and it just didn't happen that their adoption was organized by the Sacred Heart nuns.
well,
and
that's true.
it was done
Yeah.
through the Guild. So the Guild handled a lot of adoptions for homes, private nursing homes. Again, you could have been a St. Rita's, or one of the other, proprietors that were operating in. You did look for your birth cert, right? And
Yes.
it's registered,
Yep.
registered illegally as her.
And the only reason I thought I might have really been born in Dublin is that my mom remembers that I have pictures of myself when I was a week old with my mom and grandmother holding me. So I was adopted before I was a week old. So I always thought it probably had to be somewhere near Dublin in those days for my parents to get me so quickly.
Yeah.
You
Then
know,
they could have pulled 5 or 6 days on you, and your parents wouldn't have known.
Well, Paula, tell her what your mom always told you about your birthday.
yeah. So my mom and dad always told me my birthday, as I know it, is April 9th, 1959. And on my birth certificate, that was the legal birth certificate, but not legal because it said they were my parents. It says April 2nd. And my mom said that they were trying to make me be a week older because it all had to do with coming over to the US. They wanted to prove like that I was born earlier than I was, something about the paperwork coming over here. So I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the story I was told. But they were very insistent that April 9th was my real birthday. I don't feel like they would have lied to me about that.
I reckon, no, Paul, 1 second, you might adore them, but they illegally adopted a child. So
That's true, but they were very emphatic about I was born on April 9th, but I had to use April 2nd as my birthday. So,
Right.
they were very insistent on the lie. So
Yeah. Well,
Well,
I
I
mean,
think-
they could have been told this is the date that you need to use. And
Mhm.
again, I'm not faulting them.
Right.
They
No,
might have
it's-
just been following what they were told.
at this point, I believe anything anymore.
Yeah.
I'm just, Lori knows I'm so exhausted from all of this stuff. It's just like,
Does get overwhelming. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's like, I just believe anything, it's like somebody can knock on the door and go, hey, I'm your mom. I go, okay,
See, I'm the opposite side of the coin. I'm the doubting Thomas. Prove it to me.
Paula, I think
Wow.
it might be worth telling Mari and Fiona about your aunt and that she acted whenever she had immigrated to Boston, but whenever she wanted a trip home to Ireland, she would contact the nuns at St. Patrick's Guild and they would pay for her ticket. And then when she returned to the United States, she would bring children with her.
common.
Well, actually, I had two aunts that used
Oh,
to
you're
do
doing
that.
it. Okay.
Yeah, very,
Oh,
very.
Well, I mean, just it might be
Family
interesting
business going on.
Little
tracking
human
down
trafficking.
those
Mhm.
manifests or tracking down those trips, if it's
Yeah.
possible, of those aunts, to see if there's babies that they brought over that maybe haven't come up.
Right.
Well, that's an
I
idea.
I probably have them on my list, because you can see where children were brought over in groups, let's say, 5 or 6, and then there might be one obvious adult or two obvious adults that stand out, generally younger women, who might have been coming
Oh.
to work in the States. And they're offered the chance, look, we'll take care of your airfare if you'll take these children over for us and get them to JFK. So yeah, that was very common.
Huh.
And
Yeah.
used, flight attendants. They used priests, other nuns. My brother and I were brought over by different medical doctors who were affiliated with Besborough. So yeah, they had a whole chain of connections.
Well, didn't you post something once about Danny Kaye?
Yeah, he was a mule. He brought 2 children over.
Yeah.
I have a photo of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Back in 52, I think it was.
Yeah.
And we know who those children are. I have identified them. I don't know if they've made themselves known online or anything, but yeah.
Huh. Well, one of my aunts that used to do that is still alive.
Oh, she is.
And yes, the other one's passed away a long time ago. The other one was the one that was more connected. She was very connected in the whole. In fact, she was the aunt that I'm talking about that's still alive. She ended up adopting a baby in the U.S. But when she was first trying to adopt a baby, my dad's sister, in the US, she was trying to make her do a shady deal about checking into a hospital in Boston. And another woman would check in that was having a baby, and they would switch names, and then she would come out with this woman's baby. And My aunt said, no, I can't in good conscience do that. Because my aunt's super religious, follows all the rules, the one here that's still alive. My other aunt, um, from everything I hear, she was pretty shady about things. And so I think, unfortunately, I didn't know this whole story until she passed away, but I believe she was involved in leading my parents to St. Patrick's Guild and making this happen. And my dad and her were really close. So it just kind of all seems to
Could
piece
you not
together.
give her a brandy and have your cell phone ready to record one night?
Oh, my aunt will tell me anything. She was the one that I went to see when I first started this. She I met with her one night, and she told me that when she was in Boston, my mom and dad had come to live with her when they first moved over, and I was a baby. And one day she got a letter in the mail, my aunt, and it was addressed to Mrs. Holmes, but she thought it was addressed to her, and she opened it, and it was from a nun in Ireland. And she was asking about me. And she said, I could tell in this letter that you were adopted. And my mother came over here with me and lied and said, that she'd had me, and was telling her all the stories and everything. So my aunt handed my mom the letter, and she said, my mom never spoke about it. My mom never, in fact, no one in the family really knew, unless they heard from someone else, that I was adopted. I wasn't supposed to know I was adopted, according to my aunt. So, and that was the aunt that got me to go see the Philomena movie. And then I connected with you after that. So she's been very helpful. She'll tell me anything that she knows, but unfortunately she just wasn't, she was already in the US when I was adopted. So she wasn't connected to this, but she believes my other aunt was probably involved too, because she was so shady. And, that's when she told me the story about what my aunt tried to do here. So, I mean, and my aunt was a sweet lady. I really loved her. My dad loved her. So it's like, I hate to say she was shady, but.
I know. And nobody, people wanted children. It's not that they were all bad people. I think, in your case, it worked out for the best. In my case, it was not horrendous, but there were just too many other cases where it was, and due diligence wasn't followed, and a lot of people
Right.
miserable.
Paula,
Yes.
have you any idea what your original name would have been?
No.
Before you don't, no idea at all.
No.
Okay.
No, nothing at all. I even tried to get my mom to give me more information, like, several years ago, when I was first getting involved in this, because I didn't find out. I always knew I was adopted, but I didn't know it was illegally adopted. But my mom had Alzheimer's. She wasn't super bad. She still, she was with it. She knew who we were and everything. I tried to pump her for some information a few years ago, but it's like she's blocked out everything about that. She remembers it happened, but she doesn't remember the details, so.
The reason I asked that question is because there's a guy he was on today, as a matter of fact, on Zoom call from Ireland. His name is Tyrone Bowes, and he does DNA sort of detective work. And he suggests that if you can get the name, doesn't matter how far back, and through DNA, you can bring it down to modern times. So, for example, if you had an idea or even get the area of the country that he may have come from too, because back in the day, people stayed within 5 miles of each other. Like back, say, as early as 1840 or 1850. And it may have branched out later on, but even so, it's still within an area, and the name would lead you to who maybe.
Well, we're pretty close on the one side of Paula's family. They're Fitzgeralds, and they were in Killenaw, Tipperary, and we have them, I think, back to about 1840. And I have filled out the tree as much as I can, and I told Paula there's some DNA matches that have come up recently on MyHeritage that I think again, I think I sent her pictures. I was like, Paula, I'm really sure that these two people are your grandparents, that it was, you know, and we think that her father was on the Fitzgerald side, because what we have learned from the DNA, and then hunting down people, contacting people who are like third cousin DNA matches. And again, it's amazing what people know and what people did know. Just even finding out that this line of Fitzgerald's, they left and went to England, but they would come back in the summers. And again, it's like, well, if Paula, knowing that Paula was born in Ireland and adopted out of Ireland, that's the kind of scenario where you look at it and you go, okay, so the father was home during the summers. Paula was born in April. The mother was somewhere in, also Tipperary people, but not Killenaw. Well, again, maybe but close to Killenaw.
But yeah, that's it's spitting distance. Or
Exactly. And so that's why, again, are we open? Am I open to like going down other, search paths? Yes. But it's like, we know that one parent was a Fitzgerald. Like I said, we know the Fitzgeralds have done a lot. I don't know if she's still on here. There's one of Paula's cousins was going to come on. Linda, I don't know if she's still here or not, but she's again like a third cousin, and a lot of the Fitzgeralds have done DNA. So that tree, that side of the tree is, again, I can rule out, well, based on the distance genetically, this wasn't Paula's grandparents, or this wasn't, and there is this branch now that is very close, and I believe they went to they were in Manchester, and again, like that's the best hypothesis based on what we know. But again, it's what you don't know. It's the DNA matches you don't have that you can't be certain because you don't have them. And but that's kind of the scenario we're working with, that the mother, and again, if it does turn out to be this woman and that has passed away, but it's believed in the family that she got pregnant at 15. Her mother took her to Dublin when she was 15, which would have been the time Paula was born. And it was like one of those poorly kept secrets in the family kind of thing, So we just need one of these potential half siblings to do the DNA test. To know.
Laura, what Bose was saying, that you can invite, say, the neighbors of those people, and sometimes they give you more information than the half siblings or whoever.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The local postmaster or mistress,
Well, the milkman, yeah.
Yeah, and Paula and I have said, like, Paula has been to Ireland and met some of her like thirdish cousins, and they actually took her around and they got DNA samples from 3 people. And it turns out that they were not actually related to Paula, but they were boots on the ground. And I would love it if one day Paula and I could go do boots on the ground together.
That's my boots on the ground right there.
Yeah, okay, there you go. And Paula has boots on the ground. This cousin Sheila, that and I've also noticed this: you get more information from people that are like at the third cousin level, and then once you start getting too close, people stop responding to your messages, your emails, and that's how that's another reason you can kind of guess that you're close, because the third cousins are just thrilled to be in contact, and then it's
all fun and games until you find out it's granny or auntie. So
exactly.
The other thing that was great about that trip that I did, Lori, my daughter went with me too, on that trip, and Sheila was like the orchestrator. She's amazing. She's a go-getter, and she got on the phone to these people. She talked to them. She drove us around. So she's just very charming, and of course, lives in Ireland. So she knew how to approach all these people. Whereas my daughter and I could have done a decent job, but we're still obviously basically Americans. So I just think that the tone of having someone that's over there, it was just so helpful. So she's offered to go to this possible half brother's house, knock on his door and go, hey, I'm here for a DNA sample, So hopefully we're hoping Lori has an insider going maybe to London to see where this sample is in a couple of weeks.
Well, yeah. So this cousin Marie lives in London, and my husband Ken just told me that he has to go to London on business. And I was like, well, you might have to go meet up. And Marie actually came over here in 2019 for our family funeral and stayed with me. So Paula has not met Marie, but I have met Marie. And I went with her drove her to Virginia to this cousin's funeral. And so Ken, she stayed with us. So Ken knows. I was like, you might have to go meet up with Marie and shake her down for the DNA test. While you're in London. So but I messaged her now like 3 times and she hasn't responded. So whenever she clams up like that, it makes us,
You'll get more information out of men than you will out of women.
Ah,
that's
'Cause
interesting.
Women will know so much, and then it's like if I was the half sister or whatever, or the cousin, I wouldn't want to be the one to tell the aunt that her sister had whatever, whereas the guys will just, my advice to you would be email the half brother, ask him a potential half brother, always put potential just in
Potential.
and just say, look, there is a chance, would you please be willing just to do a DNA test so we can either resolve it or solve it one way or the other, and I can go up and take it or whatever, you know what I mean? This rather than sending them in the post, if you need someone to go and do it, just give me a shout when I get back. So,
okay. Well, we got several options here, Lori.
Like I said,
Yay.
more boots on the ground here, so. And also don't rule out the local authorities. They can be very helpful. I got quite a bit of information from the Tipperary County Council researcher, I guess she would be, and lovely woman. Will do anything for you via email. It's not like you don't have to go book an appointment because they know you're here, obviously.
Oh, wow.
She was amazing. Yeah, she's like, yeah, no bother, I'll go check through records, and did give me a few tidbits. There wasn't a lot there, but she was very willing to help. So that might be a good person to tap into. I can send her email details.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Fiona, I was wondering, Fiona, if you could tell us a little bit about your story and
it's very short and sweet. Born in Besborough, 73. Adopted literally 20 miles up the road. My biological parents, I tracked them down when I know who they were. I knew who my mother was from the time I was about 16. And I had it confirmed by the infamous Sister Sarto when I was about 24, 25 maybe. I went out and I met her one day and I handed her an envelope.
This is a brilliant story, by the way. You have figured.
Well, I asked her and she went off to get the information and came back, and I had knew nuns very well. I had a brown envelope in my hand, and kind of insinuated that it was a very stocky brown envelope. So she gave me my mother's name, but she did that for certain people, but she gave me my mother's name, told me roughly where she was from, and gave me roughly her age. So I slipped the brown envelope across the table to the nun and said, thank you very much, and left. I sent her tickets to a ploughing match. Gone out the road, rolled up the skirt back up to a mini skirt. I cross on, I ripped it off, and I shot out the gate as fast as I could.
Well, there's a burn bridge.
Oh, Sarto, believe me, we are both on her.
Oh my God.
She has panic attacks when she finds out I'm anywhere near court.
He ended up living around the corner,
Yeah,
literally around the corner from Besborough for a couple of years. I used to walk the dogs down there pretty much every day.
Wow.
Sarto lived independently from the convent. She lived around the corner from it. So I had this great big German Shepherd, and I used to just let him go in and shit in her garden regularly. It was just awful. I know. She's still alive. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, she keeps tabs on them for
she's
us.
still alive. I mean,
Did you name the dog Karma? Because that would be good.
You don't want to know what the dog's name was.
but so I mean, you know, it's just a typical Irish adoption, really. There's no, you know,
Excuse me.
Okay.
totally excluded out from any scheme of any shape, make, or form, because I wasn't in Bessborough 6 months. So
Oh, excuse me. And that's the starting bar that they're using. I don't know if people are aware of that. In order to receive any sort of compensation, you had to have been there at least 6 months. And for most in-country adoptees, they would have been gone and out the door. In Fiona's case, like what, 3 weeks?
oh, less. I was
Less than that.
born the 1st of December, and I was out before Christmas. So
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So that excludes a really healthy population of Irish adoptees. You know, and then like those of us that were sent to the US, we were held a bit longer because it just took longer to process things and whatever correspondence. So I was almost 2 when I came. My brother was 2.5. So we will have had some time in the institution. And then there were we have friends that one girl was there nearly 6 years before she was sent to New York. She has serious memories, you know, of Bessborough, not all happy, obviously. She's since passed on. We've gotten another one, Brendan, I guess he was there. Yeah, he was maybe 6 or 7. So almost to the point where they would have, had they not been adopted, they would have been sent on to industrial school.
Wow.
Approaching that age where, you know, they wouldn't be kept in a mother and baby home.
Mary, I have a question. Did the Philadelphia Catholic Social Services have anything to do with your
Yeah, they were
adoption?
the back end.
Yeah.
Now that didn't really start happening though until the late 1950s.
Yeah,
The US was very skeptical about this. They thought it stunk to high heaven from the start. And there's documentation from Monsignor John O'Grady, who was then the head of Catholic Charities US, who had made several trips and met with McQuaid, Archbishop McQuaid at the time, and some of the religious orders. And he really didn't like it. And they basically turned around and said, oh, he's just a senile old fool. What does he know? I mean, this is all documented in foreign affairs records. I have volumes of them. And but at a certain point, there was a compromise made where they would involve local Catholic Charities branches more heavily in the US in vetting the adoptive parents, making sure their bona fides were all, you know, up to snuff.
right.
So by the time my parents adopted me, and then later my brother Marty, they had to go through pretty rigorous in-home studies, and you know, things were on a much better feel, at least in terms of sussing out parents. But before that, it was like, you got a bank account, great. You wrote us a check, great. And that was, and you had a letter from your parish priest that basically said you were of good standing.
Yeah.
That was all that was required up until the late 1950s.
Or in my case, if you had a shady sister, you
Connection.
got a baby.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone, it's been great. I've got to get off. I have to go back to work for a couple minutes here. And you've been all very wonderful to talk with. Thank you for inviting me, Lori.
Oh,
Talk to
thanks.
you,
Thanks
Paul.
for coming on, Paula.
Thank you for
Really
sharing
appreciate
so
it.
much. Yeah.
Right, not a problem. Open book on this. Thank you, everyone. I'll talk to you another time, hopefully, with some good news
you.
on a DNA
Yes.
test.
Yes.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Laura, have you ever thought about if grab somebody's head of hair or something and get up close to oh, no, I'm being devious now.
I've only ever thought about that in my own family. And it was after there, oh, this is terrible. My grandmother, it was the last cousin of her generation, and she was in her 90s, and she told me she would do a DNA test for me. And she was so healthy, and I just thought I had some time, and she died. And I just was like, oh, could I just, gotta get someone in her family to give me her hairbrush or something. Because that generation, getting someone's DNA from that generation would give us so many answers. But no, I know that I do show up at family funerals with DNA tests.
Yeah.
Do you really?
I swear I do. And people do them for me. Cousins do them for
Oh,
me. Cousins that I've never met before, have done, people that I've met for the first time, total strangers have done DNA tests for me.
Victor,
And yeah. So yeah, I always have DNA kits. I buy them when they're on sale, like 40-50% off, and I have a stockpile. And it's just once I've started seeing connections between people who didn't know each other, like for instance, it turns out that my sister-in-law's husband, he's 100% Sicilian, his parents came over from Sicily, and he lives in Cleveland, Ohio. Has lived in Cleveland, Ohio his whole life. Turns out that he was a third to fourth cousin to the grandmother of someone that my son dated in high school. And you see it in the Irish world, you see it in the Italian world. These people came from the same towns, and they came here. Now there were apparently this one town in Italy that my son's friend's grandmother, her family came to. It was Norristown. And apparently everybody either went to Norristown or to this little town in Boston. And so it was populated with these families. And I'm not sure exactly how she's related to my brother-in-law, but like that's the kind of thing that I've just started encountering over and over and over and over and over again. And seemingly random people connected. And then the more DNA tests people would do for me, the more I would get contacted by people looking for their biological families. Just they would see the tests that I managed, and they would contact me, and I just started being able to help people find their biological families. And it's like I just feel everybody deserves to know. You have a right to know where you came from, and you don't have to apologize. Like, I know you have to be careful with families, but I also feel like you don't have to apologize for your existence. And you have every right to know who. In fact, right now I'm in the middle of. Turns out that my great grandmother's brother, sea captain, Captain John, in 1946, fathered an illegitimate child out of wedlock. He was married. He was in his 40s, and we know, based on the DNA, our new cousin, her mother was born in 1946, and based on the DNA, her, the woman that gave birth to her, the grandmother, would have been very young, like 20 or early 20s. So it's not a pretty story, but it's fascinating. And we have new cousins, and we're all about these two other cousins of mine who are also related to her, and we work together, and we're all about, like, what do you want to know? And we have tracked down, we know, again, we're the ones who are like in there finding her birth mother's, her birth grandmother's families, and now we're in touch with some of them. And again, it's the ones that aren't responding are the ones that are possibly, her mother, or I'm sorry, her mother's half sister. Like, they're not responding. But then the second cousin has been very free with the information.
I have a question for Michael. Michael,
Yes.
as far as I know, you didn't know you had Irish in you, correct?
I knew that I knew that I had Irish in me, yes, but I didn't know that I came, my grandparents actually came from Ireland in 26.
Yeah.
And only last year did I meet my first cousins, my first family that I've ever known.
Wow.
DNA.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I when I did the ancestry and it came up, 87% Northern Ireland, and the rest was England and Scotland. I was like, oh, that's like from being from like, 42nd and Broadway. Like, so I was like
American mutt.
And my mother said that her family had come from County Mayo. And in third grade, the Irish nun said, where does your family come from? And I said, County Mayo. And she said, if everybody from County Mayo actually came from County Mayo who claimed, there'd be 7 million people. And then when I did the DNA, her family came from. So both sides of my family have a little English and Scottish, but they
That's-
were both like almost like 90-something% Irish on each side. And then actually people that we went to high school with knew my father before I did.
Really?
Wow.
Was like you were like someone was saying, like everything is so close. And
Mhm.
so the neighborhood that I grew up in, my family was only 2 miles away. And I never knew. And like, so now my cousin is trying to get all of her brothers and sisters to do the DNA test. And they're starting to do it because I've met 2 of the 9. So my father had like 9 women and his brother had 9 kids. So, and I was like in between wife 1 and 2. And my mother she came from a foster home, Catholic Charities, and didn't fit in with the family because she didn't come from a good Catholic family, basically. And she was she didn't fit in with the family business. So, so they got rid of her. They got rid of her and they hired somebody to put his name on my birth certificate. So for many years, friends of ours from high school went looking for this other name and they kept coming back after 35 years, nothing. And so I only had my middle name and my confirmation name. And then when I found out my father's name, I realized why my mother asked me to take the name Joseph. My name is Michael James Joseph. My father's name was James Joseph. So she was giving me a little kernel of something, but she
Yeah.
died at 41 and I never could ask her. And then I grew up through Catholic Charities with the Brothers of Charity, which I had an amazing
Parties at least.
so it was and I had an amazing experience with the Brothers of Charity in Philadelphia.